Hi, everybody. I'm super excited to have David Winston here. He's really sort of a big inspiration for bringing the conference to Cincinnati and celebrating the legacy of the Lloyd Library and the history of the Eclectics. And gosh, there's so much to kind of dive into, but I'll let him talk about his class that he's going to teach and his excitement about coming to Cincinnati.
Thank you, Susan. So the first time I went to Cincinnati into the Lloyd Library was around 1978. And talk about a kid in a candy store. It was to me this remarkable thing. There was this library of eclectic medicine. And for anybody who doesn't know about the eclectics, they were medical doctors from around 1830 through the 1940s who were primarily herbal doctors. And as an herbalist, I know some people remember history from high school and they dread it. It was memorizing all these dates of when this person did that and when all these men did all these things. And while the history of the eclectics and the other sectarian medicine, like the physiomedicalists, is still mostly men, uh, still it is those of us who are herbalists. This is our heritage. This is part of the sort of the DNA of modern American herbal medicine, the eclectics, the physiomedicalists, who are also botanical medical doctors. And I think it is important to understand our history. Where do we come from? And of course, in the American herbal renaissance, which basically starts out of the hippie back to the land movement of the late 1960s, those of us who got infected with the incredible, joy and passion of plants and plant medicine, we looked for information wherever we could find it. So whether it was Native American traditions, the eclectics, the physiomedicalists, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, traditional Southern folk medicine, other ethnic traditions, wherever we could find that information, we wanted it because at that time, herbal medicine was not quite extinct. It still existed in certain ethnic and rural communities, but for the most part, it was not only not mainstream, it was mostly just non-existent in mainstream America. And so we found out that all this stuff had happened before. And there's this old expression: those that do not know history are doomed to repeat it. And there's truth here. When I read the old journals from the eclectics and I see about them, all this internecine squabbling between the eclectics and the physiomedicalists and the homeopaths, and then later on the naturopathic physicians, and they're spending all this time and energy fighting amongst themselves, when in reality they have so much more in common than, of course, the sort of medical establishment, the orthodoxy, who was trying to make them go extinct, and eventually were pretty darn successful in doing so. And then we see things like today where there's this whole push about standardization. The eclectics did that, and with disastrous results. And so the class that I'm going to be presenting at the International Herb Symposium this time is a class I call From Thompson to the Eclectics, specific simple medicines to specific medications. And yes, it's part of a history class telling us who our sort of herbal forebearers were to some degree. And of course, there's more. We're not covering everybody, but the Thomsonians, the physiomedicalists, the eclectics. So part of it's a history lesson, introducing people to these practices and to their ideas and how they worked with plants. And then it goes off into a very specific part where it actually examines how specific medication worked and how we can start to learn the specific indications for plants. And the specific indications are really fantastic, because what it does is it creates these word pictures, very short, simple word pictures that helps us to understand where a specific herb is going to be appropriate in a given situation. And so within this class, we're focusing in on skin remedies. And we're all talking about oral remedies, not topical. And yes, certainly there are topical things you can use when you have skin problems. But since most skin problems, with the exception of an allergic dermatitis or photosensitivity, are really internal problems being expressed externally, that's actually the most important way to treat them. And so we learn things like, for instance, yellow dock, Rumex crispus, and the specific indication is skin conditions that are oozing, weeping, or have a serous discharge. And knowing that when I have somebody with that condition, using something like Rumex is going to have a really specific effect for that pattern that they see. And so we're going to go into depth on that and so show people just how useful these traditions are. Yes, they are 150 years old, but they're still as relevant today as they were 150 years ago when this information was created and the whole practice of specific medication was created. And sadly, rudely interrupted, meaning, specific medication was not a done deal. It was created by John Milton Scudder around 1870. And you see from 1870 through the 1920s this evolution as they're sort of working with this idea and growing the practice and understanding the herbs even better and really understanding their materia medica. And then, of course, the eclectics pretty much disappear. Some of their practices or a lot of their stuff is picked up by the naturopathic physicians, but the practice of specific medication and the ongoing sort of at that point, 50 plus, 60 plus year experiment that they've been doing pretty much stops. And so I think it is oh, it is part of our, um, I don't know if ancestry is probably not the right word, but it is part of our heritage to pick this up, to learn about it, and to carry it forward into the future, not only for the helping the people that we work with today, but the generations to come. We have a country where American medicine is the most costly medicine in the world. We spend more per capita than any country in the world. Yet, in almost every health statistic, we lag behind every other developed country, whether it's infant mortality, maternal mortality, life expectancy. I mean, we're pretty close to the top when it comes to some things like cancer rates and obesity, but all the important measures, we rank really poorly. And so it is my belief, it's not that herbal medicine has all the answers. It's not, it doesn't. But it's so ironic that where herbal medicine is strong is almost exactly where orthodox medicine is weak, and the obverse is true. And so I actually believe that really incredibly well done herbal medicine can be a piece, not the whole deal, but a piece of helping to create a sustainable practice of medicine in this country and around the world. And so I think part of that is not only looking at the science of today, not only looking at the tradition of all of our ancestors, but we have, again, this period of 100 to 150 years where there were, again, these medical doctors who were in clinical practice treating people and writing all this down that is just a rich field of information for us to look at, to understand, to absorb, and then move forward. And so that's what I'm hoping to share with you all at the IHS.
Yeah, well, I'm super excited. I really feel like this is a renaissance moment, and the intention of, moving the International Herb Symposium to Cincinnati is to get people re-interested in this history and, as you said, see where it takes us. And yeah, when you think about like acupuncture being integrated into Chinese hospitals, or you think about Ayurvedic having a role in hospitals in India, I totally visualize a future where these two complementary medicines can work together, and people can, yeah, take pride in this historical heritage and really like legacy that herbal medicine has in the United States, right? I mean, there's so many other elements of social drivers of change, the acceptance of, allowing anybody to study medicine. I mean, all these things were, kind of uh, to some extent, I feel like the eclectics were, you know, um, really ahead of their time. You know, I mean, of course, there was, you know, all kinds of different social dynamics that were happening during that time period. Um, but they allowed, you know, Jewish people to study medicine when there was a lot of racism against Jewish people at that time. And, um, you know, they were really, you know, open to all kinds of ideas. And I think something you mentioned, they were very good at debating each other, right? Like there was, and that's an important thing of any discourse, you know, like being able to you know challenge people to share opinions, their case studies, you know, how they did their case studies. Anyways, there's a lot to be learned. I'm really excited about your class. I'm really excited about bringing herbalists and really, you know, highlighting this history in Cincinnati. I think there may have been up to maybe 50 different schools of eclectic medicine, but I think the school in Cincinnati, the Eclectical Medical Institute, was really, I don't know, kind of the heart of the eclectics. And one thing I'll share before we wrap up is that I have been doing some research and um, digging through archives and newspapers, and they actually held several graduation ceremonies in Memorial Hall for the Eclectic Medical Institute, which I find super fascinating. So we're going to be gathering in the same place where graduates got their degrees, where John Uri Lloyd could have handed, you know, a plethora of students their actual diplomas, and we'll be in that same building kind of talking about them, right? So anyways, I'm super excited. So um yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add. I mean, I could see, I mean, I think, you know, um people, you know, people know about you. They know about herbalist and alchemist and your school, and um usually I let people introduce themselves. We kind of miss that, but I don't know if you want to say anything before we close.
Well, um, what to say about oneself? If anybody, you know, my name is David Winston. I'm an herbalist. I'm an ethnobotanist. I've been, you know, studying herbal medicine now for 59 years. I've been in clinical practice 56 years, and I've been in clinical practice for 49 years. And I joke, but I'm not joking when I tell people after, you know, 56 years, I now feel comfortable calling myself an advanced beginner. One of the beauties of herbal medicine, I think some people find this daunting, I don't, is that no matter how much you know, it's a fraction of what there is to know. And the Lloyd Library, which we've been talking about, is probably the world's greatest repository of botanical medicine. It is a treasure, you know, for herbalists to get access to all of these incredible things that are there. And as I said, I first started going to the Lloyd Library around 1978. And I'll just quickly say that when I first went there the first time, they used to have a little book you'd sign in when you got there. And I was the first person that had been to the library in about a month. And the person before me who had been there was a high school kid who was doing a paper on the state flower of Ohio. Um, and when I came and they introduced myself and told them why I was there, they were so excited because no one was interested. And of course, this was a time when very few people were interested in herbal medicine in general. But, you know, we just have, as American herbalists, we have this incredibly rich history, and much of it is there at the Lloyd Library. And so, number one, it's an incredible resource for us. And you know, the first American Herbalist Guild conference we held in Cincinnati at the Lloyd Library, and then we did another one some maybe about 10 years later. Um, and the Eclectic Medical Institute, which becomes the Eclectic Medical College, was the flagship school of the eclectic movement. Uh, and there's a long history of how there's a long history with like going back into the 1850s with like grave robbing and cannons and just crazy stuff. That stuff is more fun to know about than informative. But I just see, you know, coming together here is a incredible thing. And for me, it's not where my herbal journey starts, but it was an important place in my herbal journey. I first discovered the eclectics in 1975, I think, 75, maybe 76. And to understand that this happened, again, historically, it's like, oh, it's long in the past. But there's, granted, there's some of the diseases they treated, like cholera and typhus and typhoid, we don't see today, and we're probably never going to see today. But when you understand and you read, for instance, about Eupatorium bone set, and you read about what it's useful for and how the specific indications for, like, for conditions where your bones hurt and ache, and you're treating somebody today who's got chikungunya, which is a virus, which we used to only see people who went to Central America and the Caribbean and South America come get it and come back to the US. Well, with global climate change, now we're seeing cases of chikungunya show up in Florida and the Gulf Coast that were contracted there. So guess what? We're going to be seeing a lot more of it. And one of the major symptoms is this intense, deep-seated pain in the bones. We already know what to use for it.
Yeah.
So it is just there's so much for us to know and to learn, and as you were saying, Susan, to debate and to share that wisdom. And that's one of the beauties of the International Herb Symposium. It brings people together from all over the world to share information, and to share our passion. And if anybody hasn't figured it out, it's like I fell in love with herbs. It's probably the enduring passion of my life, and I'm still just as excited about it and passionate about it now as I was back then. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this all with you. And we're also talking about, the day after the conference, me doing an eclectic plant walk at the sanctuary. So that will be exciting. Maybe a couple other possible things as well. So
Yeah.
a few things are still possibilities, but I think the plant walk's pretty much a definite. So I hope to see you all there.
Yeah. Awesome. See you in Cincinnati.